Strange Figment presents.
Local volunteers wanted to help with decorations at new haunted house. All are welcome to apply, no previous experience required, the ad had read, and included a phone number to call for more information. John had come across the post endlessly scrolling through the Reddit page for his local community. The user that had posted it, Haunt for You, had posted the same thing in several other subreddits for other communities nearby. There wasn't any more detail than that, but it didn't matter. John was in. When he was little, he wasn't that into Halloween. It was only more recently that he'd really gotten into the spirit of the holiday and started decorating his small house more and more each year. It started with the usual, some orange and purple lights, spider webs, a few fake-looking spiders, but in more recent years, he'd leveled up his game. The fake spiders were replaced by ones so real that it looked like they were going to crawl right off the webs. He'd gotten those huge 12-foot skeletons and added his own touches. Glowing red eyes, a throbbing heart in its rib cage, and a red light pointing up at it from below, adding to the creep factor. So, picking up his cell, he entered the number and dialed. The other end quickly picked up, and a recording started to play. Slow, distorted circus music played in the background for a few seconds before the voice of an old man started speaking, his voice sounding old and dusty. A little cheesy, but what was a haunted house without a little cheese? "Thank you for your interest in volunteering to help with decorations for this year's event," the man started. "All are welcome to participate. No experience needed. We ask that only the truly dedicated apply, however. We promise that this will be an event that people will be talking about for years to come." The old man paused, and the music faded out. John started to wonder if it was just some kind of joke as the silence stretched on for several more seconds. Then, a polite woman's voice came on the line, giving him the address of where to come for more information, the name of the company, and the person to talk to. It was nice the next day, and the address wasn't too far away from his house, so John just decided to ride his bike. The days were getting colder and the air chilled his face as he rode. But he was excited enough to not pay it much mind. There's no bike rack at the building, so he just chains his bike to the closest pole. The main entry door slides open as he approaches, motion activated of course, and he walks into a plain-looking lobby like one you'd see in any of the thousands of generic office buildings all across the city. The receptionist looks up from her screen and smiles widely, almost a little too much. "Hello there, how can I help you?" "I'm looking for Blacklight Builders. They gave me this address but didn't tell me how to find their actual office." She gives a short nod, the smile never leaving her face. "So you need to go down that hall there," she points to the hall to the right of her desk. "Walk all the way to the end, turn right, and you'll be there. Can't miss it, the door has a big black light bulb on it." John hesitates for a moment. Something about the woman tugs at the back of his mind. He can't quite place it, though. "Thanks," he replies, already walking away. He made his way down the hall and turned the corner. The hallway ahead of him faded into blackness, like someone had forgot to turn on all the lights. A few more steps and he was standing in front of the door with the black light bulb sign hanging on it. More accurately, it was a piece of paper that someone had taped to the door, the ink smudged slightly on the logo. It was a little disconcerting, but John convinced himself it was fine. After all, why would a company that makes haunted houses have year-round office space? He knocked twice and turned the handle, pushing the door inward. Inside the dimly lit room was a large desk, completely empty save for a stack of papers and a pen in the center, and a small black box with a cable running to it from the floor. No one else besides John was in the room. "Hello?" he called out. "Anyone here?" He waited, but the only sound was the quiet click of the thermostat as the office's AC turned on. He was about to leave when a loud static crackle came from the box on the desk. "Here to help with the decorating?" a too loud voice said from the box. An intercom. Yeah, is this the right place?" John asked. He looked around to check for any kind of cameras, but there wasn't anything else in the room. "Yep, right place," the gruff voice answered. "If you're interested, sign the papers and we'll call you." Okay, so this is weird, John thought to himself. But then again, most people that really enjoy Halloween and all things spooky like me are a little different. He stepped forward and pulled the stack of papers closer, picking up the pen. He took one last look around and then signed the page. Again, the intercom crackled. It hissed for a few seconds before the loud voice came on again. "Okay, thanks. You can go." John set the pen down and pushed the pages back to the center of the desk. He took one look around, looking for anything weird that might tell him he was being pranked. Nothing. He started to turn back to the door, but a large black shape dashed out from behind the desk and rushed towards him. John threw up his arms to block the attacker, but it wasn't enough. A bat connected with the side of his head, and the world slipped away into darkness. His eyes fluttered open. How long was he out? His head feels like it was hit by a semi-truck. He tries to blink away the spots swimming in his vision, but to no avail. From what he can see, the room around him is almost completely dark, save for a red light casting the room in a devilish glow. His mind slowly starts to come into focus and his vision clears, at least in one eye. The other one seems to be swollen shut. It's only then that he realizes his wrists and ankles are bound tightly with a coarse rope, and his mouth has been covered with a large strip of duct tape. He tries to struggle to get free, but the rope only digs deeper into his skin. Panicked, he looks around for anyone or anything that could help him. Then he notices the other rope, the one tied around his neck. He can't exactly see it, but he already knows how it's tied. He looks up to see the other end tied to a rafter above him with just a little bit of slack. And looking down, he sees he's standing on a small platform, a few feet square. "At least I won't fall off," he thought, relieved. His heart was still racing, threatening to burst from his chest. He needed to calm down, to think rationally about the situation and how he could get free. Then a loud bang came from behind the door to his right, the sound of another door slamming closed. Then the door to his room opened and two large men walked in, one carrying a small stool. He watched helplessly as one man wrapped his arms around John's legs and lifted him while the other placed the larger platform to the side and replaced it with the much smaller stool. He tried to struggle against the man's hold on him, but the man proved to be stronger than expected. The stool was much smaller, so small that it barely had room for both of John's feet to stand on. It was also slightly shorter, requiring him to stand on the balls of his feet so the rope around his neck remained loose. The two men picked up the platform and, without a word or a second glance at John, walked out of the room, closing the door behind them. John was again alone. He knew that if he struggled too much, he risked slipping off the stool, and that would be the end. He still had no idea where he was and why he was even there. What had he done? Did he somehow piss off the wrong person? A roaring sound began to grow in his ears as his heart worked overtime and the adrenaline coursed through his body. He dared not struggle, as if he slipped, that would be the end. The world would go black and fade away as his body thrashed, trying to get the oxygen it desperately needed. Loud screams jolted him out of his thoughts. He desperately tried to call out for help, but his words were muffled by the tape covering his mouth. He tried to work his jaw to see if he could get it to come free, but it was stuck fast. His calves were beginning to burn from having to support the weight of his body on just the balls of his feet. He tried relaxing his legs a little, but the coarse rope dug into his neck. More screams came from around him. He wondered if there were others. Maybe the same people that had taken him and kidnapped others and were torturing them too. He had to get out of there. Had to let someone know what was happening. The cacophony of screams grew louder around him, and John realized that there must be more than just the two men that he saw. He could make out at least 6 or 7 distinct voices among the cries. Tears began to well up in his eyes, listening to their agony. He felt lightheaded, and the spots swam in his eyes, clouding his vision once more. He realized he'd been so distracted that he'd relaxed his legs and stood flat-footed on the stool. Pain seared through the muscles in his calves as he pushed his body weight back up and balanced precariously on that small stool. He wasn't sure how much longer he'd be able to hold out. Then he heard the unmistakable sound of a chainsaw as it started up, whoever was using it revving it for effect. It was close, maybe right next door, and loud enough to be heard over the screams of the others. He could hear a woman pleading, sobbing uncontrollably, begging to be let go. "Oh God, please no, 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 not my leg, please." Then she let out a blood-curdling scream as the sound of a chainsaw motor was joined by a grinding sound, and then a loud snap. The woman had fallen silent. As the sound of the chainsaw motor faded, John knew it could only be one thing. He just hoped the woman was still alive and would last long enough for help to arrive. His fears were confirmed when he smelled burning flesh, as whoever was in the next room cauterized whatever was left of the woman's leg. Just as he was coming to grips with what happened, the door opened. Panic rose inside of him again as he instinctively struggled, unable to see who was entering from the shadows. Was it his turn? Had they come to finish the job? He was helpless, dangling there, subject to whatever horrifying whims these people have. But then he heard the gasps. A small group of what looked like college students emerged from the shadows, backing into the wall opposite him. He was saved. If he could just get one of them over to take the tape off of his mouth, he could explain everything. He tried to motion with his head for them to come over, but it still just came off like more struggling. They just stood where they'd stopped in the center of the opposite wall, staring back at him. Why were they there if they hadn't come to help? He screamed through the tape again, pleading with them, tears rolling down his face. He began to thrash, trying to get them to understand that he needed help, but they just watched. Some of them even looking bored. In all his thrashing, he didn't notice the stool sliding farther and farther to the side with each kick of his legs until it was too late. He lost his footing, and the stool tipped over, leaving only empty air between his feet and the floor. His body struggled once again, fighting instinctively to survive. But still, they just watched. They watched him struggle and choke, desperately gasping for breath as the world around him started growing dim. But then, just before he loses consciousness for the last time, he hears one of the girls say loudly, so as to be heard over the screams of the others, "Gwen, this haunted house is great and all, but some of these decorations look pretty fake," pointing to him. "Let's go to the next room.